Hello, world. Welcome to Phil Ross's living room and a live cast of Somerset House. This talk, which was originally supposed to happen live, has unfortunately been pushed into this virtual realm because of what we're all now suffering through, this indooritis. So we're still here virtually together, a very interesting panel to discuss what does it say here? This evening's talk will explore the organic phenomena of mycelium, both in the natural world and in design, and we'll ask whether investigating and embracing the natural world can inform and improve our everyday life and find solutions to man-made environmental crises. So that's a big thing to tackle in an hour, but we're going to try it right here. We want to give a big thanks out to the Gaia Art Foundation for supporting this program, and we'll be mentioning them a little bit later, as well as all the people at Somerset House who have acted to put this together and to bring this to you right now. So hi, I'm Phil Ross. I'm the co-founder and currently the CTO of a company called MyCoWorks. I'll tell you a little bit more about that in a little bit. I want to introduce the different people who are on this panel along with me, these esteemed colleagues, and just kind of tell you a little bit about each of them, and then I'll start blathering for a few minutes, and then each of them will have a chance to eloquently describe their research to you. And then we're going to all sort of, enmesh together in a conversation and take some questions from you after that. So are you all ready? Here we go. So the first person who's going to be speaking after myself is Merlin Sheldrake. He is an accomplished author and has helped to describe the rhizomatic relationships, the relationships between fungi and other organisms. And how that connection is rationalized and described, and is also a student of the history of science. We had a really interesting discussion the other day, the panelists, and really it was kind of like I think the thing that we came to of why fungi are so interesting, or why mycelium is such a fascinating subject that brings so many people in, is because it points to so many mysteries that still exist in our world that are not resolved. And that's just a really interesting place on the map where things are not yet described. And so that's, I think, what Merlin is undertaken in part of his description, is just like, how do we describe this world which is unknown to us? I also have Ehab Said, who is the founder of a company also in London that is making mycelium materials for practical applications, and is Biome. Is that the pronoun? Okay, good. All right, you never know. Biome. And is seeking to take agricultural waste and transform that into valuable products, working on the concepts of a circular economy, of using what might be found locally and finding ways to put that towards practical applications. Rather than thinking of waste, we might think of the human sort of sphere as generating a lot of wealth in practical materials that can be transformed via mycelium. We also have with us here tonight, today, I don't know, wherever you are in the planet, it's morning here, but I have Nancy Deniz, who is over right there with you all, England, and in London, and is founder of a new program at the school there of, oh gosh, hold on, I can't talk and read at the same time. I'm sorry, can you?
Central St. Martin's.
Thank you. Which is also where I was supposed to give a talk tomorrow. But I haven't left my bedroom in like a month, so I'm sorry for oversight. Every day is today here. And I'm going to be talking with some of her students tomorrow, and I think what came about conversation that was staying when we first got together was just her understanding of how her students were responding to this, just as an educational material, and the differences of what it's like to work with a living material versus a non-living material, and all of the problems that presents, and the rearrangement of priorities and our ambitions around how we might make or grow things. So we're gonna, each person here has a really distinct type of history and background towards what has brought them to mycelium. So I think it should be a really interesting discussion. With that, I'm gonna set my timer to 6 minutes and show you all a little something. Let me figure out my timer. Hold on. Okay. Got that. Now I'm going to share my screen with you, and I will tell you some things. Hold on a second. I'm not sure how to share the screen on here. Hold on. Hi, I lost you. I'm back. I'm going to share my screen now. Can you all hear me? Thumbs up? Okay, great. So I'm going to share my screen now. Thank you for suffering through these technical difficulties together, alone. Hold on, here we go. I must share it. Okay, great. You can all see this. Oh gosh. All right. Hey, here we go. So I'm starting my timer. I'm going. Good Lord. Live cast. Understanding mycology, the study of mushroom science or fungus science, was born about the same time as we began using microscopes. So it is, the first organism or kingdom, to be described in this new type of way, through understanding it through its, its microscopic lifestyle. And really, we didn't know about the life cycle of the mushroom until we started to look at it through this kind of refractive index, through some sort of artificial lensing to understand what was going on in this hidden part of the world. So this, also happened around the same time that there was the development of this concept of, something like photography, or the idea of an encapsulated part of the world that could be, set apart from the rest of it, almost like what we call a photonomic way of looking at reality, one where you can distance and extend some artificial construct around any part of the given world. This has led to, currently our use of microscopy has aligned with other sort of topological explorations into our physical reality. So it's added this sort of way that we have to understand optical information, but also understand information that is hidden within something, something that is not always apparent. Taking this history of starting to look at what was going on in this hidden world led to the expansion of an understanding of the vastness of being small. And this is a world that we've really only just begun to explore, the sort of the inside space of the world, which is practically infinite as far as it goes. And we also now know that these microscopic aspects of the world can be transmitted via, say, physical objects, and that they can bring all sorts of, enormous effects outside of them, that the very small has an effect on the very large. As this is kind of shown here, of taking this Leeuwenhoek image of the flea and then extending it and the mosquito and the various other sort of things that might bother people, and imagining them on a gigantic or enormous scale. So, the thing about microscopes and the whole thing about looking at the world optically is that we have to do this through lenses, things that are corrective in being able to take, information about what's going on around us and then to, again, like put it within some corrective index so that we can look at it correctly or understand what it is that we are seeing. This is an image from Louis Pasteur, who started to understand what was spoiling wine and other fermented products, and began to really look at the cultivation of specific types of yeasts and being able to create pure cultures, that is, cultures that did not have other sort of microbes involved with them, and taking this tiny little division of organisms and then expanding that up into different sort of artificial spaces. The same as taking a camera revealed certain aspects of being inside, the insidedness of being inside of a pasteurized space or an in vitro space had its own ramifications for the abstraction that life forms could take. This followed with both human application to other life forms, first in plant life, and then back to, here it is, extending down this in vitro space, bubbling out throughout the world, these artificial constructions of biological reality. And now they're growing ever smaller to match our precision organization and directed abilities to define and characterize those microorganisms. This is an array from the Quake Lab that's about the size of your thumbnail and contains, maybe, I think, 100,000 different wells or containers or cells that an organism might live inside of, down to a very, very small confined space. And this has been true for human beings as well. We have gone to live in vitro, living inside of glass. This is a part of architectural history that's been kind of going on for some 400 plus years in the West, where we now want to fully live within this ourselves inside of these in vitro spaces, which are very similar to our shopping malls and apartment complexes and business places as well. I think this is a remarkable image of a human inside of a test tube looking at another test tube type thing. This is the biosphere. And so to me, it was very interesting, like how you could take this idea of an abstractable space and then what you might put into it, such as a mushroom, could then be defined in very different ways when you start to look at how you might work with its control systems. This is mycelium eating a log. And then, the things with mushrooms is that they live inside of stuff, then they go out into space as microscopic organisms, like this, up into the air, into the stratosphere, and come back down to Earth and then live inside of things again. So it's a rather remarkable life cycle. They live inside of things and they grow insidiously. Ooh, my timer is going off. Inside, insidious. So I was just thinking about that when I was showering, and I think right now my time is up, so I'm going to hand it off to the next presenter, who's Merlin Sheldrake, and let me not share my screen. Stop sharing. I'm going to stop sharing. Okay, Merlin, are you ready? Are you the first person who's going to? Am I doing this incorrectly? Yes. Okay. All right. I'm going to hand off then and mute myself.
Thanks. My name is Merlin, and I research the fungi that live in the soil, and they also live in plant roots in a symbiotic relationship, known as mychorrizal fungi, from the myco, fungus, and rhiza, root. And more recently, I've been writing a book about fungi called Entangled Life, how fungi make our world, change our minds, and shape our futures, which is out in the States in mid-May. Was going to be out in UK in May too, but unfortunately, due to circumstances, it's been postponed to September, which in fact might be a better time for a book about fungi. So I'm going to introduce a little bit these fungi, these mycorrhizal fungi, this ancient association that underpins all life on land, all recognizable life on land. And really, fungi are a more fundamental part of planthood than leaves or fruit or flowers or even roots. The story begins about 600 million years ago, and life on land is a scorched, barren, windswept, desolate place. Life is overwhelmingly an aquatic event. Mollusks are thriving, corals are forming reefs, 9-foot-long sea scorpions are ranging across the floor of the ocean. And around this kind of time, algae, freshwater algae, started to wash up on the shores of lakes and rivers and continue to live on the shores of lakes and rivers. Now, algae can photosynthesize, which means they can eat light and carbon dioxide from the air, but they're not very good at acquiring nutrients from solid ground, or water from solid ground, in fact. They're very vulnerable on land. Fungi, on the other hand, are experts at acquiring water and nutrients from solid ground. So there was perfect conditions for a relationship to form here, and indeed it did. And so the fungus would provide the algae with nutrients and water, and the alga would provide the fungus with energy-rich sugars and lipids that it had formed in photosynthesis. And in fact, for 50 million years, the ancestors of plants did not have any roots. Fungi were their roots for 50 million years, while plants took their time and worked out or evolved their own roots. So the word mycorrhiza has it right. Roots, rhiza, followed fungi into being. And today, over 90% of plants form these relationships, these mycorrhizal relationships. And in fact, what we call plants are algae, which have evolved to farm fungi, fungi which have evolved to farm algae. So the exchange is similar today. Plants provide fungi with up to 30% of their energy budget, and fungi provide plants with mineral nutrients like nitrogen and phosphorus from the soil. And they also provide plants with water and micronutrients from the soil, copper. But they also defend plants from diseases, and they enable plants to fight off insect pests more effectively. And they enable plants to resist stresses like salinity and heavy metals more effectively. And some people describe them as ecosystem engineers. They make up between a third and a half of soil biomass. So these mycorrhizal fungi are a hugely important part of the planet, in fact, in a global nutrient cycle. And there are some other interesting ramifications to this relationship. Fungi are promiscuous and connect to different plants. One fungus can connect to multiple plants. And plants too are promiscuous, and one plant can connect to multiple fungi. And this means you can have shared networks that arise between plants and fungi. And this is the concept sometimes known as the Wood Wide Web, where plants can be linked together by fungal networks. Nutrients can pass between plants via fungal networks. Signaling compounds can pass between plants via fungal networks. This is a whole new field of study, which is just opening up right now. I like to think of it as, if you imagine the puzzlement of an extraterrestrial anthropologist who'd been studying humanity for decades and only just discovered that we had something called the internet. A bit like that for contemporary ecologists. So we're really standing at the edge of a whole new field of questions and learning how little we know. So I wanted to show you, just to give you a feeling for this relationship and its intimacy. I wanted to show you, I'll take you on a tour of a root. I've just been rendering a video from a root scan made with lasers. So the root is, I got a root and I stained the plant with one type of fluorescent dye, and I stained the fungus with another type of fluorescent dye, and then scanned it with the lasers, two different types of lasers. So you receive the two different channels of data. And then you can form a three-dimensional scan of the plant root. And unfortunately, it's just been rendering furiously for the last few minutes, hasn't finished. So you're going to see an incomplete video, but at least it's fresh. I'm going to try sharing my screen here. Let's see. So this is a type of, is this working? Yeah. So this is a section of a plant root. The plant is in bluey green and the fungus is in red. And you'll see in just a moment. We begin our tour. So this plant, it's a type of plant that really is heavily dependent on these fungi. So this is perhaps on the extreme end of the spectrum, but nonetheless, it's a very good way to get a sense of this relationship. Here we go. So you can see the fungi living inside in quite a defined space. They're really part of the plant anatomy. They're an organ of the plant. And the plant itself is an organ of the fungus. That space in the middle is where the plant has its vasculature, where it conducts its water and nutrients. Here we go inside. Take a little spin here. What is it like to be a fungus inside a plant? It wouldn't be red, that's for sure. There we finished it. We were supposed to zoom back out, and then we were going to do another little spin and all sorts of fun stuff. But unfortunately, that's all we've got for now. So I'm sorry, but there we go. That should give you a feeling for how intimate this relationship is, and how codependent these organisms are. And it's really one of the most blockbuster, ancient, and astonishing relationships that we have on this planet. And it has given rise to us. It's shaped all of our past. It's shaped the past of the planet and has shaped the future of the planet for a long time and continues to do so. So in any discussion of fungi in the future, these organisms will play a big part. I'll hand it off.
That was great. Thank you so much. Next is Ehab Saeed from Biome. Are you there? Can you?
Yes.
Great. I'm gonna shut up.
Thank you, Phil. That was absolutely fascinating, Merlin. Yeah, and thank you all for tuning in. And I'd like to also thank the Somerset House team for continuing to keep this fascinating conversation going despite the circumstances. I'm just going to share my screen quickly. Can you all see that? Right. So I'm Ehab Saeed. I'm the founder and director of innovation at Biome. And I think it's fair to say that we are all currently living through unprecedented times. The world had to switch gears overnight, and we all found ourselves sitting at home, reflecting, reassessing, and reevaluating, making us collectively and critically question our consumption habits, our production practices, and the way we do business. This is a textbook scenario where the systems governing our economies are undergoing major transformation and reorganization, driven by changes in our value systems and our reliance on certain resources. This usually leads to the emergence of a new economy, and given the prominence of a biorevolution of sorts emerging across various industries, we hope that this new economy will be one that is governed by nature and takes into account the health and well-being of our planet and all of its inhabitants. At Biome, we place biological systems and processes at the heart of our inspiration to revolutionize the built environment and the way we do business. And we achieve this through our bio-based materials, circular construction systems, and a range of services. But our bio-based materials, and particularly our work with Mycelium, will obviously be the focus of this discussion. Fungi are wondrous organisms, as I'm sure you've all got a glimpse a minute ago, and we have barely scratched the surface when it comes to realizing their true potential. But our team of mycologists and designers and scientists and engineers have managed to make amazing advances in getting us a little bit closer to that. We have developed a building insulation product made out of mycelium, grown on a variety of organic byproducts and waste streams. As we were developing our strains and biomanufacturing technologies, we knew that they would result in improved thermal and acoustic insulation as we were utilizing, emphasizing, and informing mycelium's natural properties. But when we actually started testing our mycelium insulation against industry standards, we were blown away by how we managed to achieve thermal conductivity values of 0.024, which probably means not much to most people, but it competes with market-leading insulation, and in some cases it's 2 to 3 times the thermal insulation values of commonly used alternatives. You can see here as well, it's got amazing fire properties without any treatment, and And when it comes to actually testing it, when we test it for VOCs, which is volatile organic compounds, these are released by materials throughout their life and affect the indoor air quality in buildings. That obviously affects our health and well-being. We scored the highest possible score of A+, which makes it one of the healthiest materials to use, outperforming almost all other insulation products on the market by simply using nature's genius. Now, last year we had an interesting little discovery in our R&D lab, which led us onto a super exciting journey. Whilst carrying out some experimental work on the strains we are developing, we had the number of grain spawn jars growing in our incubation room. Now, we usually put a plastic PE or PU sponge in the top of the jar to allow for air circulation or airflow. And the mycelium just fills the jar and starts to increase in density. However, on this one occasion, we found that one of our strains was brave enough to venture out of the jar, grow through the sponge, and it started to produce its antennae. After 2 months of growth, we decided to cut into it and see what had happened to the sponge, and found no sign of the sponge at all. Now, of course, at this stage, we knew that a large number of variables could have come into play, and that this does not necessarily mean that the mycelium had consumed the plastic, but we were also aware of mycelium's remediation capabilities, known as mychorrizal, which is a process by which fungi produces appropriate enzymes that break down complex compounds like plastics into hydrocarbons and carbon dioxide. The rate of degradation that we were able to achieve, however, was quite significant, and that was quite the revelation. Last year, the Onion Collective, a social enterprise at the vanguard of social action and community business, joined forces with Biome, and we were awarded the Waitrose Plant Plastic Prize to continue to develop this research further and ensure that such technologies have a transformational impact on local communities. This has allowed us to carry out numerous experiments over the last 8 months, where we continue to evolve our strains through a non-intrusive and non-GMO process known as directed evolution, which basically mimics the process of evolution in an accelerated lab environment. This has resulted in the development of 3 strains that can successfully consume PU and PE. On the right here, you can see a plastic stick that's completely covered in mycelium. There is no other source of nutrients in there apart from the plastic. And further experiments that we were able to do, and further, I guess, more sophisticated experiments, allowed us to actually identify that there was a reduction in the plastic that is available within the mycelium. So the mycelium is actively consuming it. And as I mentioned, all 3 strains demonstrated the ability to degrade polyurethane and polyethylene, which was a huge surprise for us. We didn't quite think we'd get that far that quickly. So it was a really great move. And in terms of the its potential, the current plastic recycling processes can tend to propagate current plastic crises and encourage the production of more plastics, whereas this process completely eliminates plastic completely, and the outputs, so for example, the non-toxic hydrocarbons are stored in the resulting mycelium material, which in itself is a replacement for plastic and other damaging materials, and the carbon dioxide is turned back into oxygen through the process of photosynthesis, fed back into our incubation space, providing fresh, oxygen-rich air for the next batch of mycelium. So that ensures a completely circular and closed-loop manufacturing process, which would result in the production facility effectively being a bit of a carbon sink. So although our mycelium insulation, which is currently available and grown on organic substrates, we aim to eventually integrate the plastics and other synthetic waste streams into the inputs of our production process, and that will come from the construction and fashion industry, as well as other sectors that we're looking at. Now, due to the vast environmental benefits and global potential of such technologies, it was essential for us to deliver this to the world in a way that is ethical, equitable, and sensitive to our current economic landscape at a time where it is needed the most. So we're setting up the world's first community-led biomanufacturing facility with the Onion Collective. And apart from being the first large-scale facility to produce mycelium insulation, another unique aspect of this collaboration is the way it acts as a catalyst for regeneration within a community. Again, taking inspiration from nature, we have developed a business model that allows communities to drive industry in quite a revolutionary way that ensures the regeneration of the local community, environment, and economy. Much like many examples of positive and mutually beneficial symbiosis in nature, like Merlin has just showed us, we have mimicked that process and aligned the incentives, motives, and needs that you witness in symbiotic relationships to actually create new business models, ensuring that all stakeholders that play a part of or are affected by our operations are taken into account, and that the facility only has a positive impact as much as we can, moving beyond sustainability and towards regeneration. Our first facility is almost completely built, as you can see in this time lapse, in Watchet, West Somerset. There's obviously been a bit of a delay because of the corona situation, but it will start at a scale of about 1,500 square meters of insulation panels as an output, which is around 10 homes worth of insulation per month. And over the next couple of years, will eventually be scaled up to provide 120 homes worth of insulation. And at that scale, we use around 150 tons of waste, sequestering around 30 tons of carbon, according to the simulations we've carried out, and it will provide over 30 new local jobs and a constant income for the community, allowing them to invest in their education, infrastructure, and social action projects. We're also working with the YMCA to set up the second facility in Newcastle by 2021, and have been invited to set up in other countries and geographical locations by governments around the globe, allowing us to make serious leaps in the fight against the climate crisis, and equitably distribute wealth and showcase a new global economy that benefits from global interconnectedness and the sharing of knowledge, but works with more reliable local supply chains and empowers local communities. We're about to launch our crowdfunding campaign, so you're all welcome to come along with us on the journey. And we hope that our work, alongside the work of many other great minds in this field and with us here today in this talk, will play a part in influencing, inspiring, and implementing this new economy that is slowly unfolding before our eyes. Thank you very much.
Wow, that was great. Thank you so much. Now, the third in the lineup here is Nancy Denise. Nancy, are you there?
Yes.
Okay, I'm going to hand it off to you then.
Yes. Can you see my screen? Hi, everyone. Thank you very much. I'm very excited to be amongst so many inspiring speakers. So I'm going to quickly go through a little bit of an introduction of my work as a practitioner, and then I'm going to show you some work I've been developing at Central St. Martin's. So in our practice, so I'm an architect. We are two architects that have a very small practice. We are fascinated by living systems, and we've been working with living systems as a collaborator in terms of design process. We look at living systems in different ways. Sometimes they are an inspiration towards form finding. We are very interested in form, I guess all architects are. So for example, we work with bacteria. We are very interested in understanding living systems and playing around matrices of variables that might have to do with nutrients or environmental factors, understanding how can we shape behavior, how can we influence growth, how can we influence color, how can we establish some sort of understanding of living systems as a driver of form and efficiency. So some examples that I'm going to show you that have to do with our work, not just using mycelium. So we look at living systems as a whole. And for example, this is slime mold. I'm sure some of you already know, but slime mold is a kind of a fascinating culture. And our work is very computational. we really use computational design to simulate living systems and understand how living systems work. I'm not sure if you guys are, yeah, I think maybe I need to minimize this because it was interfering with my slides. But an example of how you can understand computationally how living systems behave, and then how can you extract form and geometry. So an example here of several computational studies, agent-based computational studies of how we can simulate mycelium growth, and then how can we translate that into form and space and objects. So some slides that show our design process, for example, with slime mold, and then how we can translate these into, for example, this was a project that had to do with the biosensors in a wearable project, and then how, of course, using digital fabrication, how we can translate these living systems to matter, materials, objects, and space. So I like this image because it really shows this contrast in my life. On the left, you can see my DIY lab / living room. And on the right, you can see the Grow Lab at St. Martin's, this really nice lab that we have in school. I like to show this image because I've learned everything by myself in terms of mycelium. This is me in my living room making panels, slime mold panels. And this is, I like it because it really shows, and I talked about this, and I talk about this all the time with my students, that you don't really need a lab to work with mycelium, to work with biomaterials, to start, you know, learning on your own and trying to understand how this can work and it can be scaled. So I'm very proud to say that I've learned everything on my own, trial and error, understanding. A lot of our work has to do with waste. We are very interested in using waste as a raw material in my practice, understanding how you can transform different kinds of waste, agricultural, domestic waste, to produce affordable materials using waste byproducts. So this is what's, you know, some of our studies. I've been teaching for 5 years. I started teaching mycelium with the innovative commercial packages with my students at RPI, Rensselaer Polytechnic Institute, and at CASE, Center for Architecture, Science and Ecology. And we never had a lab. We just did everything in a normal architectural studio. And these are some of our examples in our practice where we experimented with different scales, different objects, understanding really how can we generate geometry, not just for the sake of geometry, but really trying to make geometry meaningful in terms of, for example, increasing surface. We were very interested how mycelium could clean air, remove VOC, something that Ihab mentioned, and he's been doing incredible work. How can we start using other add other additives to mycelium, for example, activated carbon. This is one of the ones that we use, and how activated carbon can start using the air, absorbing VOCs. So this idea of bioremediation, environmental bioremediation is key. Some images of our work, but also you can see here a close-up of one of the panels, but how you can start thinking about granularity, how you can really start thinking about efficiency and performance of mycelium. And this is not, our work is not just about mycelium. So we are very interested in using, for example, these are biopolymers using waste. So how can we start translating this into other materials? It's something that we are very interested. So we are very interested in materials, but we are also very interested in digital processes. And see, these are some images of the work we've been developing in terms of 3D printing. How can we create our own 3D printed waste filaments? And how can we not just work with molds, because this is something we've been using a lot. How can we create mycelium objects through molds, but how can we start 3D printing mycelium? So some images of the work. And we are also very interested in this relationship between digital and material. So for example, if you look at the image on the left, you see that what happens in reality, in the physical world, is very different from what you draw digitally. For example, you can see the difference and the effect of gravity and physics, right? When you start 3D printing something, a geometry, and how it turns out something different. And so we are very fascinated with this transition and this kind of in between digital and bio, and how we really can use this in our practice in terms of aesthetics, in terms of performance. So images, some images that really translate this idea of biomaterials that can really start 3D printing waste in a way. So I'm going to talk a little bit about, of course, biodesign, the MA in biodesign at Central St. Martin's, something that the team is putting together. And I'm going to show you some of the work we've been doing with Mycelium. So what we see in the course is that we see living systems as a design tool. And it's very much about any other tool. That's how I think about it. It's almost like you think about computational design. If you think if you are a textile designer, you think as loom as your tool. Here we see living systems as a tool, as a means to do something tangible, meaningful, and palpable. And some of the work we've been doing, some of the living systems we've been using, from algae, slime mold, soil. We started the year with focusing on soil. This idea that the students work very much through experimental planning, scientific protocols. They really become familiar in the lab. How can we really start being very rigorous with the living systems? How can we start extrapolating quantifiable data? How can we drive design with a very rigorous kind of scientific methodology? So a big emphasis on data and image analysis, data visualization. We have a really nice space, biosafety level 1 category, the lab, which is all very nice, but the way we see the lab as a design studio, as a space of experimentation. It's almost like we are turning a science lab into a design studio lab. And this is what we like, and this is what we find exciting when we start getting messy, and then when we start, not thinking as scientists of what should we or not should do, but let's just try and experiment crazy ideas, which is something that scientists sometimes don't like to do. But so this idea of looking at the world as interconnected systems is something nuclear to the way we set up briefs, understanding ecosystems, understanding living and non-living entities. So mapping out all the relationships. For example, this is a soil ecosystem that we ask students to start thinking about, and waste. So we really set up this waste and growth project, where we really started to quantify waste around us, and some images of the students' data collection on waste, and then focusing on how can we use Mycelium to bioremediate and clean environments, clean materials, and create materials out of waste. So students started obsessively collecting waste around their houses, around school, around London. And this was some of the work that they have done, some images of the work that they've done, which is like creating innovative substrates. That was the kind of the challenge. Let's just think about anything that Mycelium can eat or can feed on, and let's just think outside the box. Let's just not think about sawdust or things or straw that Mycelium really loves and grows so well, but let's just think about other things, like, for example, aluminum and metal and construction waste, all the things that, let's just see how it goes. And this was a project that started in November, and it ran for around 3 months, between other things that we were doing. And and we are going to exhibit this in Lisbon at the Math Museum. Hopefully we were going to do it in May, but now it's been canceled to hopefully October. And some of mapping out, understanding success and failure rate. Of course, we had a lot of failure, a lot of substrates did not work out. And then the idea was to use the waste around Central St. Martin's. So students went around Central St. Martin's, quantifying how much waste is produced in the school and targeting a specific kind of waste, and then using that waste to create a modular system, that could be a wall system, but that could be like a sort of like a a pergola, it could be a modular system that you could grow at an urban scale even. So it was a very kind of abstract modular system that they had to create with this modular system. And then understanding and quantifying analysis, doing image analysis of mycelium growth, the different substrates, understanding the success and failure rates. And these are some images of the work. So there were 4 groups. I'm just going to end with this image, which is one of the groups, but they all did this hexagonal kind of modular system with different designs, with different kinds of strategies towards their patterns. Obviously not random patterns, but some images, one image of the resulting project. And this is something that, you know, exemplifies the team of Central St. Martin's. So there's like 2 designers and 2 scientists as part of the core team, and the list of our students. And I will just stop here. Thank you very much.
Great, thank you so much. So I think we have some time now for a discussion, or and also to handle some questions that might be coming in from some of the people who are viewing this. And you know, it's just so interesting to hear all of, again, like these very different takes and approaches towards this. From each person has their own particular story of how they came to this. I'm thinking, like, Nancy, like you said, you know, you did this all yourself, and you've been able to pull this together just through, you know, like your ideas of experimentation, both around materials, you know, being able to bring a methodological thought, like sciences and mathematics and all that sort of stuff, and then design, which is like, you know, gets into both functionality, but then aesthetics and other sort of difficult qualitative types of things that aren't, you know, we don't measure quite the same way. I'm finding, what have you found? I mean, aside from just the difficulties of organizing that, what have you found, like the relationship of Central St. Martin's, like how have they come to embrace this as, you know, it's a very untypical development in a fashion-oriented school to have a wet lab set up. So how do they, can you explain like how that conversation started?
So that, you know, Central St. Martin's is all about sustainability, something that maybe people don't realize, but this course is being planned for like 4 years. And making the lab is being such a kind of complicated project. So the course was actually started by Carole Collet, and she started textile futures 15 years ago. And then they did material futures. And it was just a natural development within the school that now is the moment to finally have biodesign so that you guys know all courses at Central St. Martin's have learning outcomes that have to do with sustainability. So it's mandatory that all courses address certain learning outcomes in sustainability. Of course, it's a very different way of thinking, and we have a very different pedagogy than the rest of the school. But that's something that I get asked a lot. What's the difference between your degree and material futures and other degrees that are also doing architecture? It's also doing mycelium. Everybody's kind of doing mycelium. Fashion is doing mycelium. So I like to think that we really teach students. It's the way we are very demanding in terms of their research and design process. They really have to validate their ideas towards an experimental plan. Whether it's successful or not, it doesn't matter, but they really have to quantify their ideas and make them possible, which is very interesting because, for example, I'll give you an example. We had the final review and the head of school came, Jeremy Chill came to our final review, and he was like, oh, I really appreciate your rigor, scientific rigor, but come on, you guys have to be wilder. You have to look around, look at fashion at Central St. Martin's. They just do crazy things, you guys. And it made me think that it's very difficult to do both. You know, it's very difficult to have really, you know, speculative ideas and make science work. But that's what we are trying to do.
Thank you. And Saeed, I'm wondering, how have you felt, like how have you, how do I say it, like the arc of the embrace of institutionality around you, like how like what's the thing, because I mean it seems like, you know, both you've been doing a lot of experimentation, but also what I was just like, as you're chasing the fungus, it reveals a lot. It reveals even more mysteries as they go along. But then, but I'm wondering, like, in terms of, this is a pretty ambitious project that you're starting to build out there. And, that means like you have to do fundraising and you have to like convince people the same way that this is like a reality that has to be here. Can you just describe a little bit about maybe that process of rationalizations?
Yes, yeah, definitely. So I think when we started thinking about the business model that this technology will be delivered through, it was obvious that the easiest options or the easiest way to do this is to go down the conventional route, or the most common route for a startup, which is to go raise round after round and basically work on a sort of a model that prioritizes the maximization of profits to reward shareholders. That didn't quite work with the way we wanted to approach this, because we felt that a large area that needed attention within communities and within societies is the distribution of wealth in a way that is meaningful. So when we worked with the Onion Collective, we have done a lot of work and research in that area, in that field. We realized that there are ways where you can have the community as well as interested bodies like charities or organizations basically support or fund the development of a facility like this, given that this isn't a project that is likely going to make one or two people very rich, but rather it's a project that will be dispersed throughout the community and allow the continuous regeneration, also other industry to spawn out of this as well. So it's, I think, taking that approach and working closely with social enterprises has allowed us to work on an alternative, I guess, way of sharing that technology, but in a way that still works for business and commerciality. And when we're speaking with our commercial clients, they really appreciate this, because by working with us, we can allow them to meet the sustainable development goals and all their social impact. So counterintuitively, we thought it would be a big sort of barrier to get into the commercial world, but it actually turned out to be a really great plus. And I think part of that is the massive transformation we're seeing happen at the moment in in industry and the way people are thinking.
Great. Thank you. And then I'm wondering, like, Merlin, like you're how would I say it? A little more undecided to the ethical standards of mycelium, but like, what, aside from just their fantastic morphologies and like the very surprising intimacies that they share with us, how do you think, how does mycelium affect your own thinking about again, like the ethics of the natural world? Or does this promise more? Is this a good thing for us, or is it just sort of like the discovery of the internal combustion engine, which like seemed like the best thing in the world, and now is led to all sorts of unexpected downstream phenomena?
Good question. I think it's not like the combustion engine, and quite literally, who knows what downstream phenomena will arise. But I think it's a worthwhile enterprise for so many reasons. Thinking about fungi makes the world look different. These organisms are so strange. They make questions for our categories. They corrode and decompose the encrusted dogmas that we use to organize the world. They're so different from us that they lead us into these open questions that make us feel dizzy and confused in a very healthy way, I think. And in loosening the grip of some of our certainty, I think we can get into some places where we can think more broadly about what it means to be an organism, what it means to be alive, what it means even to be a human, what it means to be in relationship with the natural world, with the more than human world. And for all these reasons, thinking about fungi and working with fungi, I think is enormously important. Whether or not you produce a successful product, I think just the process of engaging with fungi, the process of thinking about fungi even, can take us to interesting places.
Great, thank you. Yeah, when we were considering the title for this talk, we came up with why is mycelium evil? As maybe to kind of counterpose that mycelium are good, to kind of go back to these kind of philosophical questions that are still as yet unanswered in the biological sciences, and how we don't maybe even have the proper thought tools to describe a lot of biology as well. Again, of just like lacking language, but also maybe even modes of thinking for actually comprehending what we see. So I think we're supposed to take some questions from the audience. Hold on a second here. Hi, Nancy. I was wondering about the shape you used for the panels. Did you base these in a mushroom? If not, check Daedalus quercina. They look so similar, from Bruno Simoes. Nancy, do you want to speak to that?
Yes. So we actually, it's the meandering pattern that you see in many corals. So it's a very very famous pattern. We look at patterns in nature and we start tweaking them, and this is what, I mean, we were very interested in the meandering pattern because it allows a lot of surface, volume of surface, and then the idea was to clean the maximum amount of air. So we had these kind of folds that would increase the surface area. So that was the criteria, obviously. I mean, we always try to have the pattern behaving in some sort of within a matrix of efficiency and performance in terms of the environmental variables. Of course, there's always the element of aesthetics. I mean, I'm not going to lie. I'm not going to say it's completely, 100% efficient. We are fascinated by, patterns in nature, but that doesn't mean we use them, just because they are interesting or beautiful. But I will check that out, Bruno. I'll check the Dalea quercina. Thanks, Bruno.
Yeah, this is you can see this actually happening in a number of different species. This sort of similar emergent patterning topologies that come from this sort of growth. We have a question that's come in from Future Studios, maybe, I think is who it's from, on the Twitterverse. And here's the question: how can the emergent biofabrication based on mycelium start to work with the existing material economy around timber, the original living building material? Have you considered using machine learning? I'm not sure if that's the same question or not, or something, but they seem like two different kinds of questions. So maybe Said, do you want to speak to that a bit, like of how this will exist, how this will coexist with the extant?
Yes. I think it's probably really important to note, first of all, mycelium is not the answer for everything. And just because we're using it as a building material, we will need other materials to work with it. So I think when you look at how it works with wood, for example, or metal and things like that, we did some experimentation with Tata steel where we looked at actually binding a piece of steel to mycelium and seeing how that would work. Initial tests showed some promising results, but we haven't taken it much further yet. But things like that, those types of approaches where you're binding the mycelium to existing materials, integrating mycelium in the biofabrication offsite, when offsite and modular construction is becoming such a big topic at the moment, is really an essential part, because mycelium provides a whole new approach to design. It makes you think of the design of a building and how you're going to erect a building in a very different way. So we are working with also some offsite an offsite construction firm where we're exploring new ways of integrating mycelium insulation directly in offsite construction methods. So yeah, wood will still live on.
Great. Yeah, I'll also put out a plug for this white paper that was just published this week that came out of the think tank for Eurofung, which describes how fungal mycelium and biotechnologies based on that will integrate into a larger bioeconomy, and to describe some of those relationships between, say, timber extraction and manufacturing and other types of things. So you can check that out online. It will be on our website, and it's, I believe, published in biotechnology, fungal biology and biotechnologies, and you can find this online, authored by Professor Vera Meyer from the Technical University in Berlin. So again, like if you want more resources, and that has like a really great number of other informations there that you can go out. Oh, clap for the NHS if you can. Hey everyone. think I broke my screen.
Loud.
How long does this go on? I don't know. Here goes this. We don't do that here in San Francisco. We just, I don't know what we do. Some people yell. Thank you. Thank you, everyone who's, you know, the concept of microbiology has become a very popular subject all of a sudden, and concepts that were very difficult to get across even just a month ago. Now I'm finding people are becoming very familiar with cross-contaminations and infections, and the idea of biosecurities, or a lot of the other issues that come up when you start working with microorganisms that are just part of the landscape that you get. Am I supposed to? Okay, wait, we have a couple more questions here. Have you considered using machine learning? I'm still not quite sure how that, maybe if that person wants to pose that again. For what? What's like, yes. What role do you imagine living systems will play in the future of architectural habitations and interplanetary habitation? LOL. Merlin, you want to take that one for interplanetary habitation? I mean, we probably each have our own thoughts on that, but I'm curious what you would think about that.
Well, it certainly is judged to have promise by NASA, who are actively investigating this. I mean, if you want a pop-up structure, then what better structure than one that grows? Ecovative, who developed this technology early on, they received a big grant from DARPA, the Defense Advanced Project Research Agency in America, wing of the military, to grow barracks out of mycelium that self-heal when they've been damaged. And so the idea of, you know, structures that can be popped up quickly and then taken down quickly and decompose when their job is done, this is built into this mycelial building idea from the very beginning. So interplanetary habitation, yes. I mean, if you don't want to carry all that biomass, absolutely, it'd be a very good idea. And all the waste you accumulate on the way, absolutely, it's a perfect weave. I imagine you'll have a very rich future, as rich as our interplanetary habitation, that is.
Does anybody else want to chime in on interplanetary exomycology or
I just want to add something to the first half of the questions, how living system will play in the future of architecture. And I think that's something that I'm super excited about, how we can start to bring buildings to life using living systems and allow buildings to interact and react to the internal and external environment. So I think that is something that is going to require a lot of research, and I can see a lot of exciting things coming out of that.
I agree. I mean, if I can say something, I mean, I started my research in 2002 about, I was really into interactive spaces, adaptable spaces, using physical computing, artificial intelligence, you know, machine learning. But that's why I'm so excited in biodesign, the biodesign movement, because I think now with the facility that we have and the connection with science and being much more, design being much more interdisciplinary, these things are actually possible. That's why I think, you know, we've been thinking about living architecture for a long time. And I think now it's really becoming a reality. So I'm totally like excited about this new world.
Great, thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think you know what everyone here can probably attest to is that it's a wide open field. You know, I myself did not have any formal training in the sciences or in biotechnologies, and was able to adapt cooking skills and other types of methodologies onto it. And you know, it still is incredibly wide open in terms of descriptions and the sciences around it. Certainly, like for younger students, like this is a really interesting area to go into, as opposed to certain things like, say, in electronics and stuff, which is a pretty well graphed out area. Like this is terra incognita, really, for most of it. And so it's like, you know, there's a huge amount of discoveries that any individual who's interested in will, are there for the taking. So I would just encourage anyone to get into it. I'll give a plug again, like MycoWorks. We have a resources page where you can go and get further information if you want to start to learn about how to grow mushrooms, or learn about the history of mycology, or how people are using it in design, or other sorts of stuff. You can go there. But I'm wondering if our other panelists have stuff that they would like to offer to our audience as other resources that people listening in, or who want to get their feet wet and growing stuff. That sounds gross, but like, yeah, other things that they might look towards.
There are a number of online mycology courses. There's a school called Mycologos, which is fantastic and has a wide array of courses from beginner to intermediate to advanced. There are also good online forums, legendary forums set up for the magic mushroom growing community in the 90s, which have now evolved and broadened and deepened and expanded into general mushroom growing forums. There's Mycotopia and the Shroomery, and those are great sources of information. A lot of this work, a lot of this development of my practical modern mycology has taken place in this kind of DIY garage, backyard kind of way. And a lot of it is grown out of the magic mushroom growing scene, kick-started in the 70s. And it's interesting to see an area of science with genuine progress being made by super low-tech practitioners. And it's again because so much is unknown. Also because mycology has long depended on its amateurs, because there's been no professional arena to conduct mycological inquiry. There's very few departments of fungal sciences. Most universities have a department of plant sciences and department of animal sciences, but fungi were only recognized as a distinct kingdom of life in the 1960s. So there's amateurs have always played an important part in the development of mycology, and they continue to do so. So it's a welcoming field in that sense, and people should feel encouraged and excited and incited.
It is definitely a people's science. I think, the history of mycology in England is really interesting in terms of how people would organize around it, and how it was really kind of came from the bottom up. Also, I would, for folks who are there, Kew Gardens is an awesome resource for checking out and learning more about mycology. They have, I think, one of the longest standing mycoriums, of a collection of mycological samples from including Captain Cook and other folks. And then I also know that Penn State has some really great online resources where you can learn to grow things, and they have like a really awesome presence of, like, if you want to learn more, and they also give a lot of degrees in this stuff. So it's in addition to all these awesome, again, like as described, DIY communities and other groups that are out there, there's a lot of communication between the bottom and the top, or it's sort of, again, like very, very mycelial, and that it's a lateral sort of thing. And then, Saeed, do you want to give any shout out to other?
I would just second what Merlin said. The forums that you find online and the way that the community really wants to support and help each other, that's a really great way to do it. I think also not being afraid to do it at home, the way Nancy described. Look at videos online, look at forums online, and just try it out at home. And slowly your knowledge base will start to grow. So I think the barrier to entry for Mycelium is incredibly low because of the incredible amounts of open source information that's on the internet. So anyone and everyone should give it a go. And we're so excited to see how the amount of students that are currently working with Mycelium has just become like the most common topic. So it's really exciting.
Mycelium brings people together. I think that we're out of time, and so I'm going to go, unless anyone stops me otherwise, I'm going to go with the closing announcements. I'd like to thank our panelists, Merlin Sheldrake, Saeed, I'm sorry, and then Nancy Diniz. I'm like, I can't talk and read at the same time. I'm trying. It's just memory or that. I'd also like to, again, Somerset House, the Gaia Art Foundation, for helping to sponsor this. And then I'd like to give a call out, an action to donate. If you can, please help support and donate to Somerset House's Crisis Fund. It is working hard to find ways in which we can help alleviate the impact on its creative community, which includes resident artists in Somerset House studios. If you are able to help support that effort, please consider making a donation, which will go towards sustaining our creative community. Head to somersethouse.org.uk for more details and to donate. And I think that that's, wow, we're closing it on time. I can't believe that. Thank you, everyone out there in Corona land, in the Omniverse, in the mycelial verse. Until the next time, thank you, everyone.
Bye, everyone.
Thank you all very much. Bye-bye.
Stay well. Bye-bye.